preserve democracy was to encourage debate based on reading different accounts and opinions. Open discussion of ideas and their faults or merits would eventually lead to the best solutions for everyone. A free press would encourage Americans to think, argue, and defend all ideas. Freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government, wrote Benjamin Franklin. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved. The Founding Fathers also believed in a press that would be a watchdog over government. These were men who had rebelled against their rulers during the American Revolution because they believed the British government, led by the king and parliament, was unfair. They wanted a press that would point out and criticize bad decisions, rather than say only good things about leaders and lawmakers. One way to protect the people from government interference was to let them know when their political leaders were acting badly. There is nothing so fretting and vexatious, nothing so justly terrible to tyrants, as a free press, wrote Samuel Adams in the Boston Gazette 8 years before the Revolution. The reason is obvious, namely because it is the bulwark of the people's liberties. A bulwark is a barrier built to defend against danger. In 1778, poet, playwright, and essayist Mercy Otis Warren wrote of the dangers of a government without a free press. The rulers, while gaining power, might suffer men to think, say, or write what they please, but when once established, the most unjust restrictions may take place, and an imprimatur, permission necessary to publish, on the press may silence the complaints and forbid the most decent remonstrances of an injured and oppressed people. A free press, not controlled by the government, could gather information. It could expose decisions and policies that were unfair to the American people. It could let people know about things the government did not want them to know. The person the Founding Fathers most feared could abuse his or her power, and who needed to be watched closely, was the president. At the Constitutional Convention in 1787, the delegates hotly debated whether the country should have a president at all, and if so, how much power he should have. Charles Pinckney, a delegate from South Carolina, expressed the dilemma. He wanted a vigorous executive, but not one that could totally control peace and war, which he believed would render the executive a monarchy of the worst kind, to wit, an elective one. In other words, even an elected president might assume the absolute powers of a king. In the end, the convention decided the United States should have one elected president, limited in his or her power by Congress and the Supreme Court. They also counted on a free press to keep an eye on the president. Because the way Americans feel about presidents and their politics varies widely, no president can count on only good press. So from the early days of our country, the amendment guarding press freedom put the president, regardless of his political party, and the press at odds with each other. If the news printed about the president was favorable, he liked the press. If it was negative or disapproving, he didn't. Most presidents have objected to news that does not agree with them or shows them in a bad light. This was the situation when the United States was founded, and it is the same today. Combative, hurtful words about presidents are not new in our history. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, Abraham Lincoln, Woodrow Wilson, Richard Nixon, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump are among the presidents who have been ripped apart in the news. Even George Washington, the first president and the father of our country, got bad press. Benjamin Franklin Bache, who took over his grandfather Benjamin Franklin's press, charged that Washington had encouraged political iniquity and legalized corruption during his presidency. Washington was possessed of power to multiply evils upon the United States, Bache wrote in the Philadelphia Aurora. Every president will try to use the press to his best advantage and to avoid those situations that aren't to his advantage. President Ronald Reagan, 1981 to 1989, said in a 1988 speech, "The press can take care of itself quite nicely, and a president should be able to take care of himself as well." Reagan was talking about a give and take, where each side has strength and the press and the president each have their own roles. His words were in keeping with the First Amendment. The Founding Fathers did not call for freedom of the news. They talked about freedom of the press. What they meant by the press was very different from what we think of now. The word came from the fact that, from the 15th century on in Europe, news was printed on a